All right, welcome to another edition of Blind Eye Live. I'm your host, Blind Eye himself, Hunter King, and let's just jump into it. Sorry I'm a little late today, and I did not stream yesterday. Had a bunch of stuff going on during the day yesterday. And sorry if I just look like a bum right now. I've been dealing with a migraine headache all afternoon so far. Finally got to where I could sit down and stand it to stream. So thanks for anyone who bears with me through this thing. But I got plenty of energy because I've got plenty to talk about. Over the last couple nights, had some really interesting NBA playoff games. We're getting Bucks Nets Game 7. Of course, since I streamed Tuesday, Kevin Durant had that crazy 47-point, 19 rebound, 10 assist triple double. Or no, 49 point, 17 rebound, 10 assist triple double. Like, just ridiculous. Carrying them to a win over the Bucks. Of course, the Bucks bounced back last night with, outstanding performances from their big three. KD had a great game. He just had very little help. Harden was a little more effective in this game, but he still only shot like 9 shots. Joe Harris still can't find the bottom of the net consistently. The only 3 that he hit last night ended up not counting. Poor guy. But Milwaukee was able to hold it down on their home floor, and now we're going to Brooklyn for a Game 7. This series has been incredible. But once again, Harden did look more effective. He had a really nice drive on Giannis last night for a bucket. And if he's feeling better for Game 7, that's going to be a huge lift for the Nets. And they're on their home court. I honestly feel like they can get it done. And so far, this series, the home team's won every game. So, it'd be hard for me to. It would be hard for me to bet against Brooklyn. That's who I'd put my money on in this game, if I was a betting man. Of course, Clippers Jazz. Paul George had a heck of a game in Game 5. Or was it Game 5? Let me look at my stuff here, my notes. Yeah, in that Game 5, without Kawhi, got the Clippers a road win with a heck of a performance on Wednesday night. Of course, the Hawks also had a big win Wednesday night to take the lead in that series. So both the Clippers and Hawks have a chance to, win these series at home in Game 6 as the underdogs of their series, especially the Hawks. Although I don't know if the Clippers, I'm not remembering the betting odds going in the series, but the Clippers may have actually been betting favorites in that series. But I know the Hawks, I think most people expected the Sixers to slap the Hawks, and the Hawks could take this series tonight. And I doubted them in Game 5. I thought the Sixers were going to bounce back being on home court and were going to, take that series lead. I thought they were going to win the next 2 games. But that's not a given right now. And the Sixers are going to have to dig deep. I mean, they're going to have to dig really deep, I think, in this game. Because, obviously the Hawks want it. And, I'd be super excited for Nate McMillan and some of the other guys on that Hawks team, getting to be a part of, a deep playoff run. Because, Gallo has always, ended up on teams typically after, or as part of trades that sent their superstar elsewhere, um, or sent a superstar player elsewhere, things of that nature. So it'd be kind of exciting to see, like, Gallo, which I'm not saying the Hawks are necessarily a title contender this year, but like seeing Gallo on like an ascending team is really cool. Like Bogdan Bogdanovic was stuck in Sacramento, slaving away there, um, and seeing him kind of start to pop off at the right time here, because he kind of struggled for a bit of the season, but ever since McMillan replaced Lloyd Pierce, like that team has been playing much better. So we'll see. Hawks Sixers is a tough one. I mean, and Clippers Jazz is a tough one. But if Kawhi is able to go for Game 6 tonight, which I haven't seen whether they've ruled him out or not, if he's able to go, I think the Clippers have it. Let me look over here and. So anyway, that's kind of like our playoff stuff. And I think I saw this Tuesday and talked about it, but Chris Paul, or I've definitely seen it. Chris Paul's in like COVID protocols apparently, which luckily this started several days ago, and this Western Conference series getting dragged out. The best thing that can happen for the Suns is for the Jazz to win Game 6, because regardless of whether they end up playing the Jazz or the Clippers, getting extra time for like that whole stupidity to work itself out with the COVID stuff is a big deal for them. No. Oh my gosh. I sometimes hate my life. By that I mean I hate being a blind man working with some of this stuff to try to figure things out. Okay, I got what I wanted. I hit the wrong thing, open up things. I'm like, I'm not trying to open that up right now. Okay, got it fixed. Okay, so let's check out So let's hit some of these headlines. We're going to get into the Kemba Walker trade right after I go through these. But some other headlines, reports Beal has committed to Team USA for Tokyo. That'll be good to have Bradley Beal on board for the Olympics. In other Celtics news, apparently their top 3 coaching candidates are Ime Udoka, Darvin Ham, and Chauncey Billups. That's not a shock. Those guys have been on the radar for a while, or especially like Udoka and Ham have been top assistants for a while. Dirk to advise Mavs help with coach and GM search. That's interesting because like they just ousted his coach and president of basketball operations. Like that guy played for Donnie Nelson, and then Donnie was in the front office for a lot of his time there, and then Carlisle, has been the coach there for I think 13 seasons. I don't know if I don't think he was the coach yet. He was not the coach yet when they lost to the Miami Heat in the finals, like when it was Dwayne Wade and Shaq. But Carlisle was the coach for the Mavs when they upset the Heatles. And Dirk finally got his championship. So that's kind of interesting. But we all very much expected Dirk to eventually have a major role in the organization. Kawhi's need to keep him sidelined for... Okay, so Kawhi is out for Game 6. They do have home court, though, so... And they are coming off a road win without him. So we'll definitely see. But that makes Game 6 harder to predict. Let's see here. let's see. All right, let's talk about this Kemba Walker trade because this is a big trade here. I don't care about your stupid ad. So here's the trade: Al Horford, Moses Brown, who's a young center. Last year, I don't know if this was his just full season stats or simply after he became the team's starting center when they shut Horford down. But he averaged 14.5 points and 15 rebounds per 36 minutes. He did not play 36 minutes a game, but he was really productive on a per minute basis. I actually think he has a lot of potential. Celtics also get a 2023 second round pick out of this. The Thunder get Kemba Walker, the 16th pick in this summer's NBA draft, and which is the Celtics' first round pick, and a 2025 second round pick. Now, so I've already read Pelton's trade grades, what I've got pulled up here, but he gave Boston a C plus for this trade. But when you read through it, some of that's is just that if we're just grading this move, it's an understandable move. It's not like a great move, but it's also not necessarily a bad move. In his eyes, like if I'm just paraphrasing his whole thing, his grade is basically like this trade kind of imbalances their roster. If they get that corrected, then it won't be as big of an issue. They've got a lot of centers now because they just acquired 2 centers for their starting point guard. And they already had like a number of centers on the roster. With Tristan Thompson, Robert Williams, Grant Williams to a degree, Luke Cornett, Taco Fall. So, which probably means that Cornett and Fall, who are, free agents, they're not going to be back, or most likely. And even then, they still need to make some moves because having Horford and Brown and Robert Williams and Tristan Thompson, I mean, Thompson's on a movable contract. Williams is going to the last year of his deal. But I think they want to extend him. So this is going to be interesting. And if they decide that they're going to play Horford at power forward, they did run some 2 big lineups with him in Boston that worked decently. And some worked pretty well. But that didn't go so well in Philly. Although, you've got Joel Embiid, who's one of the best post players in the league, and Ben Simmons, who couldn't shoot. So there wasn't like amazing spacing where Horford was really getting tons of open looks. But Horford's a better center. Like, he's just more effective as a center, offensively and defensively. So he gave the Thunder an A-, and some of this is also being colored by team situations. Like, the Thunder are in full rebuild mode. The fact that they're getting this kind of value for Horford, because when they acquired Horford, they traded Danny Green and Terrence Ferguson to the Sixers and maybe a second-round pick for a top 6 protected 2025 first-round pick, Al Horford and I think there was someone else, two other draft. I think it was the 31st pick in the draft or something like that. Whatever pick selected Theo Maledon in last year's draft, which I thought was a really good move. And Maledon ended up starting 49 games for them last year. And he dropped during the draft process. Like, going into the season, he was considered like a top 10 level prospect and ends up dropping out the first round. And he proved to be better than, or at least more capable right off than most of the guys that ended up jumping him. So, like, the Thunder to a degree are playing with house money, and they make good deals most of the time anyway, so they're probably going to get a bump in most people's trade grades because of that. And Kemba Walker is a legit, like, star player when he's healthy. His problem with Boston is he hasn't been consistently healthy, but he's been, you know, a quality player since then. And like I was saying with the Horford trade, they acquired a first-round pick for Horford taking on his contract. Well, Walker is a more impactful player than Horford. Like, Walker right now is a more impactful player than Horford was going into this season when the Thunder made that deal to bring in Horford. Well, they just got Kemba Walker and a first-round pick for Horford and Moses Brown. I don't think Moses Brown's value should be discounted here either. Because, like, Moses Brown's a quality, like, young prospect at center. Like, he should be a quality rotation center, I think, at worst, moving forward. That's a valuable piece for any team. But, I mean, the Thunder getting a first-round pick to acquire Horford, getting a first-round pick this year, that's the 16th overall pick, immediately, or for him, like, that's a better asset than a first-round pick that's going to come in 2025 that you have no idea where it's going to be. And if the Sixers keep, like, Simmons and Embiid and Thibault and are able to develop, like, young guys like Tyrese Maxey and make some other smart moves like they've been able to do, like trading for Seth Curry and stuff like that, in the Al Horford trade, where they set that first round pick, being able to get Danny Green, who has been a big part of how good they are, and one of the reasons they lost Game 5 against the Hawks because they didn't have Danny Green because of injury. You know, that 2025 pick probably won't be as good as the 16th or as the pick they just got for Horford, trading him to the Celtics. So, but once again, the Thunder are taking on more salary here because Kemba's contract's bigger than Horford's, and Horford's deal is descending, and his contract for next year is only, like, I think half the money's guaranteed. So he's only guaranteed like $14.5 million. So, like, the Celtics could do a salary dump type thing or use him in a future trade for cap purposes, and the other team could, like, potentially, like, cut him or buy him out, save some money if they're trying to get off a bad contract. And the Thunder can just turn around, and what they're going to do is they're going to do exactly what they did with Horford and Chris Paul. I guarantee, unless Walker just has some crazy awful injury, the Thunder are going to turn around, and they might even be able to turn him around for value this offseason. But at worst, I think the Thunder are going to get to the trade deadline next year, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're able to move him at the trade deadline next season for, you know, quality assets, including, you know, a first-round pick. Or at least maybe some young players or something like that. So I think this is a win-win for both teams. The Celtics definitely wanted out of that Kemba Walker contract. They're definitely going to have to make some moves. Like, maybe this means that they're going to start Marcus Smart at point guard. They probably should still bring in some kind of ball handling type guard. Definitely could use and one that can shoot consistently. We'll see what they're able to do, because they're going to move a center or two this offseason. But this is Brad Stevens' first major move as the new president of basketball operations for the Boston Celtics. because to a degree here, this looks like Brad Stevens undoing, you know, potentially like one of the sins of his predecessor, or a couple of them. One, not keeping Horford around, or doing whatever he could to try and keep Horford from leaving for nothing when he opted out of his contract or the last year of his deal and then signed with the Sixers, which definitely hurt the Celtics. And then also that sign-in trade for Kemba Walker, where, you know, they signed and traded Terry Rozier for, you know, Kemba Walker, which, if you look at that move on paper, I think everyone probably would have, most people made fun of the Hornets. But my thing is, it's like now, with hindsight, would you rather have Terry Rozier on his contract or Kemba Walker on his contract? And I feel like the Celtics would have, if they had last year's Terry Rozier on their team, that team would have been a better team. Because of because of his availability, but he's a much better defender than Walker. And he's not the playmaker Walker is. But he improved in that regard, and he was one of the best shooters in the NBA last season. And actually has been for the last couple seasons. So, and at volume. So, and I mentioned earlier about Carlisle and Donnie Nelson being out with the Mavs. That's huge. Carlisle is one of the best coaches in the NBA, period. And some of my friends believe that, you know, Luka wanted, you know, changes. That Luka wanted changes to the front office. But I don't know if I totally agree with that, but it's possible. I know there was a lot of consternation with a lot of people about how much Kristaps Porzingis is being paid and how Carlisle was using him. And to some degree, there comes a time where you probably should get new eyes on your operation. Donnie Nelson has been around that team for a long, long, long time. Carlisle's been around for a long time. And it seemed like their vision and how, like, those two guys had sculpted this team the last, you know, 3 years, but particularly the last 2 years. This team really, it didn't seem like it had improved any from the previous year. Like, in ways it did, but in ways it didn't. It's going to be very interesting to see, like, where Dallas goes with their coaching search. And considering that organization's kind of international flair, I feel like their coaching search will be a little more interesting. I would not be shocked if they hired Memphis's lead assistant. I believe his name is Rajakovic. Great player development guy. He's coached all over. He also, you know, comes from Europe, Eastern Europe, or should I say the Balkan states. I can't remember which country off the top of my head. But this guy's familiar with all levels of basketball. International play. Like on the national team levels, the club levels in Europe, and then of course working in the NBA. I mean, he has a sterling reputation, and actually for a while, I want to say he was like a specifically like player development focused coach, like not even necessarily with teams, but he was doing kind of like that. If I remember correctly, he was doing kind of like if you're familiar with the name Drew Hanlon, like he was kind of like a skills coach, like a private skills coach. So I wouldn't be the least bit shocked if he was one of the leading candidates for Dallas. And I really feel like Dallas is going to go with or go for not necessarily like an unconventional, but for a more boundary pushing um, type coach. Um, Kind of following, the Toronto mold in, hiring Nick Nurse. What Indiana was trying to do with Nate Bjorkgren, although that seems to have not worked out for personality reasons. But we shall see. And it seems like the front runners right now for the Blazers job, because the Blazers job's open. Front runners seem to be Mike D'Antoni and Chauncey Billups are the two names I'm hearing the most there. You've got, and Billups seems to be Damian Lillard's favorite candidate. Jason Kidd is also a name that's on the market. He's been an assistant with the Lakers the last couple seasons. He pulled his name out of the running for the Blazers job. But there it is. Oh, between migraine and allergies. Oh goodness. Let's see. But yeah, sources. And to look at this article, sources: Boston Celtics. I mentioned this earlier. Seek second interviews with Nets Ime Udoka, Bucks Darvin Ham, and Clippers Chauncey Billups. Ham apparently is, or from what I understand, is kind of like the defensive architect for the Bucks. Udoka has been a really good assistant for a few years. Like, he's well respected former player. Which of course Darvin Ham, longtime player, Chauncey Billups, you know, NBA champion, should be a Hall of Famer. While they seem to be the most prominent candidates in the search, they aren't necessarily the full complement of coaches on the Celtics' remaining list. Interesting. I wonder who else has taken interviews there. Let's see. Udoka has received strong reviews from Celtics players who played for the U.S. national team in the 2019 World Cup tournament. Sources said Udoka was an assistant under national team coach Greg Popovich. Udoka joined Steve Nash's staff this year after one season with the Sixers and 7 years under Popovich with the Spurs. And that's what I was going to say. I knew that Udoka had gotten his start and was a longtime Spurs assistant, which that pipeline just continues to pour out coaches. But I guess I didn't realize he was on the Sixers staff with Doc Rivers in 2019-20. Or wait. Did Rivers get the coach for 2019-20, or was he just, or did he just became the coach this year? He was on Bruce Brown's staff, that's right. Ham is considered one of the top head coaching candidates among league assistants, and has interviewed for several head coaching jobs the past couple seasons. Yeah, his that's true. His name has been around the last 2 years. Actually, I was kind of shocked he didn't get one of the jobs last year.
He has most recently been on Mike Budenholzer's staffs with the Bucks and Hawks, and broke into the NBA coaching ranks as a Lakers assistant in 2011. Ham spent 8 seasons in the NBA as a player with 6 different teams. Yeah, he was like an end-of-the-bench guy. I remember, like, during his time in the NBA, I remember, I think it was NBA Live 04, I think his rating was like a 56. Which actually was a disservice. He wasn't that bad. In his first year as an assistant with the Clippers, Billups also recently interviewed for the Portland Trailblazers head coaching job and has drawn interest from several more teams with openings, including Washington, Orlando, New Orleans, or Washington, Orlando, and New Orleans. So he's interviewed with almost everyone who had a coaching opening before yesterday. Because there are 7 openings now, and the other 2 that weren't mentioned are Indiana and Dallas. The fact that Billups is getting this kind of buzz after just 1 year as an assistant owes to like his reputation for his playing career, because pretty much everyone expected Billups to go into coaching after he retired. Billups was a 5-time NBA All-Star in his 17 seasons as a player, including MVP of the 2004 NBA Finals with the Detroit Pistons. This is very interesting because there were a lot of people who weren't expecting this next coaching cycle to have so much action after how many jobs opened up last year. But you've got Dallas and Portland being really brave. Or is brave the right word? Let's say being very aggressive with their, or because, I mean, I really respect Terry Stotts, and I think it's very interesting, like, Neil Oshie, the Blazers GM basically just said, basically said, I don't see why this roster, there's no problems with this roster. There was no issue from a talent standpoint. Basically throwing Stotts under the bus. And I'm sitting here like, you expected your defense to improve when you did trade for Robert Covington. And, Nurkic has been a positive anchor for that team when he's been healthy. But your backup centers, like Enes Kanter, you acquired Enes Kanter to be like your backup center. He was playing heavy minutes, sometimes starting. He is one of the worst defensive centers in the league. You've got Carmelo Anthony playing a prominent role for your team. Not a plus defender. Very much been a negative defender the past few years. And as much as I love Dame and CJ McCollum, they're limited defensively. So, and then you make a trade where you trade Gary Trent for Norman Powell, which may have been to some degree a defensive upgrade. I mean, Powell's really long for a guy who's like 6'3.5", 6'4". Like, he's got like a 6'10 plus wingspan. But Trent's like 6'6 with like, I believe like a 6'9 wingspan. And a really good athlete. Like, I feel like Trent had just as much defensive upside. But you made yourself definitely a little bit shorter with that trade. I don't know what Stotts really had to work with to try and field a competent defense, because he used to be able to when they had better defensive pieces. When they had Al-Farouq Aminu and Mo Harkless. And there's another wing they had on their roster at the time too that I'm blanking on his name. So I don't know. I just find obviously at some point you got to change stuff, and from their perspective at this point, it's like,
we can't. It's like they can't really do a ton with the roster. So at that point, it's like, well, I guess we'll see if a different coach can get different outcomes, and that's absolutely going to happen. I mean, I don't see how they're not going to change in some way with a new coach. Like getting new eyes on a situation, can have it. It definitely seemed like they had topped out with Stotts and with what they had, but I'm wondering if it was. I don't. I'm not going to blame Stotts necessarily because I don't necessarily think he's been given. I think he's been doing a really good job with the pieces he has. And with all the injury problems that the Blazers have dealt with from the people that Olshey has, been bringing in. I mean, Rodney Hood, yeah, it's like, who would have guessed that Rodney Hood would have suffered a major, massive injury? Nurkic he dealt with injuries in Denver. They brought him. He's dealt with injuries there. And, as much as I love him, like, as a player, like, CJ McCollum seems like he's, like, every season is missing big stretches because of, seemingly an ankle injury, usually. Or something with his foot. Or one of his feet, which, I mean, that happens to NBA players all the time, but it does seem like, McCollum misses a lot of, or extended periods of time fairly regularly. And so then you're going to count on, like, Carmelo Anthony at this stage to be a big part of your rotation. So, anyway, and also at times not necessarily drafting, to me, based on, like, your team's structure. Like, Anthony Simons has gone to waste here. Gary Trent, until basically the Trailblazers were forced to play him and he showed out, they were kind of wasting him too. Now, I get that Simons, to a degree, like, some of that is on him, but to me, that pick was kind of an interesting choice to me when, really it seemed like you need to get younger at the wings. Like, you've got Lillard and McCollum. I think Gary Trent was a second-round pick that same year. If it wasn't that, it was the next year, but I think it was the same year. Like, Trent was a pick that I thought really made a lot of sense. And I liked Simons as a prospect, but Simons was so young. Like, I think he's still got a lot of development in front of him, and I'm wondering if he's going to continue to get chances with the Blazers, because I think he's going into the last year of his contract this next year. So I don't know how the Trailblazers are necessarily going to get, like, significantly better. Ow, that was my knee. I don't know how the Trailblazers are going to get too much different results or better results from another coach. But it also depends on who they get. And typically what ends up happening with teams is either their front office has a vision, so they get a coach who more correctly aligns with maybe their thinkings on where they want the organization to go, or they decide to, like, the organization decides to flip in a totally different direction as a whole. From, like, an offensive-minded coach to a defensive-minded coach, or from, a more player development coach to a more traditional coach, like the Hawks. Lloyd Pierce, they brought in as kind of like a, player development, maybe a little more new school thinking, and, they underachieved to start this season. Like, just simply put, they weren't, like, it wasn't working. They bring in Nate McMillan, who a lot of people look at as, well, I mean, he can coach a a decent team or a good roster to the playoffs. But he really has elevated that Hawks team, and since Nate McMillan has taken over, things are really humming for Atlanta. So sometimes you just need to try like a radically different approach. So, and maybe that's what the Trailblazers are going for here, but I don't know exactly. But maybe I'm a little biased because I really like Terry Stotts. And getting back to Dallas, I think it's really interesting they're moving on from Carlisle. Like I said earlier, Carlisle is a top coach. I would say he's a top 5 coach in the league. But at the same time, I think while he has trusted some young players, I think they really needed during the season to really see if they could get Josh Green and is it Tyrell Terry, who they drafted at the top of the second round, who I'm a really big fan of as a prospect. Like, I thought he was a lottery talent personally. Like, I thought he would go in the late lottery or at least like in the top 20. Because they really could use, which, I mean, they had Jalen Brunson. Brunson's been really good for them, or, was one of my top guys for Sixth Man of the Year, Tim Hardaway. But Terry is a more dynamic ball handler and playmaker than Brunson. And you could play Brunson and Terry beside each other in certain lineups. And who knows what Brunson, like, when he hits free agency or whatever, like, what he's going to ask for or command on the market. And he seems like a guy who, I really like Brunson, but he seems like a guy who could get overpaid. So Terry's like a more cost-controlled asset moving forward. And I think he has much higher upside because he's a far more dynamic, like, scorer and shooter and ball handler than Brunson. And passer. Like, I think he has an extremely high potential. And Green is the exact kind of wing that they need. Like, extremely high defensive IQ. He's got playmaking instincts too. Like, to me, he's exactly what they want Josh Richardson to be. Well, or should I say, he should turn into a better version of what we've believed Josh Richardson to be for years. So, Carlisle can be slow to trust like young players. He's always been that way. And I feel like that has stunted a couple guys in Dallas in the past, but he has done, which Luka's just amazing. So, like, you can't really count that, but it's like he did integrate Brunson pretty quickly. And he's done wonders for Tim Hardaway Jr. But at that point, by the time Hardaway got, to Dallas, he was a veteran on, an outside second contract, but I feel like Hardaway's done as much as he can in Dallas to earn the money he's getting paid. So, but yeah, and I want to say was Dallas the team that drafted Wes Iwundu? No, that was Orlando. But they traded for Iwundu. That's what I was thinking of. Sorry, Iwundu is one of those guys like I never gave up on. He was like a second round pick. I loved watching him play college ball at Kansas State. And he was just one of those guys I've rooted for forever, and I've just wanted his career to work out, and it just hasn't. Because he had like this, there were these flashes of like, this guy could be like a Giannis Antetokounmpo light type player. Like, long, pesky defender not as long and not as big or as quite as athletic as Giannis, but he had this, you know, in college he kind of showed these flashes of like a Giannis-esque slashing, playmaking wing who could guard positions 1 through 4, and if in an NBA program or weight training program and the way the league was going, maybe even 1 through 5. Of course, that's not been the case, but especially like offensively, like his jump shots never consistently or been consistently good or anything. But anyway, somehow I got off on Wes Iwundu there. But going over these other like openings, like New Orleans, I'm not shocked Stan Van Gundy's out after a year, to be completely honest. I thought it was a bad hire at the time. He was really good with Orlando during the late 2000s, early 2010s. But there's a reason things didn't work out in Detroit. Part of it was his front office ability or his organizational management, like talent evaluation, moves he made as a front office executive. But I'm honestly, there were 2 big mistakes that New Orleans made last year or last offseason. Hiring Stan Van Gundy and extending Steven Adams. Like, Steven Adams, I think, is a borderline immovable contract unless they decide, and with the amount of picks they have, people to take him on would probably ask for like a bunch or multiple first-round picks, and you shouldn't give up multiple first-round picks to dump Steven Adams. But you're basically paying a guy who, based on your roster construction and where you're going, he should be your backup center because Zion should be playing most of his minutes at the 5. Or, like, he, at the very least, should be kind of on that Draymond, like, peak Draymond of, like, 15, 20 minutes a game. Or probably around, like, 18 minutes a game at center. And honestly, like, lineups like that, just look at the Clippers and the way they've dealt with Utah. They've been playing a lot of Nicholas Batum, Marcus Morris as their front court, their 4 and 5. And it's worked really well. They play Zubac for like 13 to like 18 minutes a game, or let's just say 15 minutes a game. And he's effective for those stretches, but I think it's usually when Gobert's not on the court. I think it's like maybe some of his minutes come against Gobert, but typically I think it's been when Utah goes to like Derek Favors. But they have spent a lot of the series just spreading out and being, having shooters or 5 shooters on the court at all times. And New Orleans, that's what they should be doing. They should be building their lineups to have Zion playing like basically that 5 spot. And that's his best spot, I think, defensively too. Steven Adams should be a backup. You shouldn't be paying your backup center $17.5 million a year. That 2-year, $35 million extension was just dumb. Like, just super dumb. But they did it. New Orleans did it. And the reason it's really dumb is because it's hamstringing their cap situation for, like, Lonzo Ball has proven, like I expected him to, that he's a guy that they should be considering part of their core moving forward. He's figured out his jump shot like I always figured he would. Dude has incredible work ethic. He's turned into an awesome defender. He is a great transition player and playmaker. And he just has the work ethic and the IQ that he had the ability, still has the ability to grow skills and still improve as a player. And seems to be a positive culture guy for the team too, because of his work ethic. So, and then of course they also have Josh Hart. Josh Hart is a great role-playing 3-and-D wing. And they have a bunch of young guys on the roster. They have Kira Lewis, who they drafted. What was it, the 12th pick, I think, last year in the draft? My favorite pick for them last year, a guy that I was wanting to end up there, was Jalen Smith, the center that the Suns ended up drafting and didn't really play much of a role this year. But I still love his fit with them long term as a guy who could play the 4 next to DeAndre Ayton because of his shooting ability. He's also a really good rebounder, has really good feet, but he can also be their backup center. Like, he can play center minutes when, Ayton's out of the game. Because he has, the athleticism to, be a plus rim protector. And once again, really good rebounder. And adds a different element at the center position because of his, plus shooting talent. I still believe in him as a player, but I really liked his fit as a guy who long-term could play next to Zion and let Zion function as a 5 offensively while letting Zion be or play the 4 defensively. And protect the rim better because of his length. Because Zion really is best as a weak side, rotating rim protector, rather than your main rim protector. So, but New Orleans, that's going to be an interesting spot. I think they should be. Well, obviously they interviewed Billups, which Billups I think would be an interesting choice for them too. But I have a feeling they're going to go kind of like I talked about with Dallas. I feel like they'll probably go with maybe a fresher face, a more new school kind of. Not that Billups is an old school guy either. We don't know yet what Billups' real philosophies are as a coach. And obviously he's a lead assistant on Ty Lue's staff with the Clippers, and I think they're being. I'm really finding their decision making with their lineups, they're definitely looking at kind of what's worked for the Warriors and some other teams, downsizing and kind of they're really using what Houston did to beat Utah in their playoff series against them when the D'Antoni Harden era Rockets, when they would beat the Jazz. So that's the type of coach that I think every team needs, really. But I think that really will benefit New Orleans with their roster, with the players they have. So I mentioned him earlier, Rajakovic. I've gotten really deep in the coaching stuff for the NBA right now, but I hope y'all don't mind, because I find it fascinating. But and then Indiana, it's going to be really interesting because they just came off of Frank Vogel was a defensive-minded head coach. And McMillan has always been kind of an older school coach, but it's players love McMillan. Players love playing for McMillan. And I remember there was this point where it was yeah, we're going to speed things up. We're going to play faster. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And then, to a degree, it didn't seem like that actually happened with the Pacers. But because McMillan does kind of like a little bit of a deliberate style, but to a degree, like McMillan's coaching does create or does, bring quality teams. Like a lot of people put him kind of in the boat with like Dwayne Casey when Casey was, in Toronto. But I don't know. I always like McMillan a little better than Dwayne Casey. Not that I have a problem with Dwayne Casey as a coach either, but I almost feel like McMillan would probably have gotten more out of those Raptors teams than Casey did. I mean, and that the Nick Nurse move obviously worked out incredibly well for Toronto. Of course, also getting Kawhi Leonard that season was a big deal too. But the Raptors are really, really good. Last season they weren't as good this year, but anyway, I think some of these coaching changes are gonna. Well, and of course Boston's opening, like we were talking about earlier. Like, who knows where they're gonna go? But it does seem like Brad Stevens is looking for a. When you look at the top 3 candidates for that job, it seems he's wanting a former player. Perspective, and it's also interesting. All 3 of those forward players played different positions. Like Darvin Ham was like a small forward. Billups, of course, was floor general point guard, and then Udoka was a power forward, like a 4-5, if I remember correctly. So it doesn't seem like he had like a player archetype in mind, but it does seem like he's looking for it seems like he's looking for the former player kind of archetype. So maybe to some degree help with buy-in. And obviously like Billups is immediately going to get buy-in from young players. Like dude's was a top flight player during all these guys, childhoods and time coming up. He's going to be respected by the most grizzled veterans on the team and the youngest guys. Udoka has been around for, and Ham have been around the coaching circles for years, and have been assistants on extremely good teams. And Udoka, of course, comes from the Popovich tree, and that tree just puts out excellent coaches. Although, because I'm trying to remember which Nash's net staff has, or also has Jock Vaughn on it. Like Jock Vaughn's the lead assistant there, who also off that Spurs tree. His time in Orlando didn't go well, but I don't fully blame him for that. It's not like that organization was run great from a front office standpoint either. But he did really well last season as the interim coach after the Nets decided to part ways with Kenny Atkinson, and that's a name that I haven't seen in connections with anything yet. But I'm kind of shocked I haven't seen Kenny. Wait, did I say Anderson? Atkinson, Kenny Atkinson. Atkinson, I thought was a really solid coach. He's a really good player development guy. At the very least, he should be someone's like lead assistant this next year. Because if he's not somewhere, I don't know if he's on someone's assistant staff right now. I need to look at different staffs. But kind of surprised I'm not seeing more about him. Or Dave Yeager, for that matter. Although it seems like maybe some of that, or for Yeager, has to do with maybe how things, how he left Memphis and how he left Sacramento. Although Sacramento shouldn't have fired him, because Yeager's a better coach than Luke Walton, as far as I'm concerned. And there was one other name. And then, of course, I know a lot of people talk, or there is, not necessarily from like in insiders as in like hearing that David Fizdale's around, but there are a lot of media types and a lot of people who are like, David Fizdale deserves another job or whatever. I thought it was kind of interesting how he got or how he went out in Memphis, because I was like, man, I'm really shocked. Like, I wasn't necessarily super excited about that, but I love Taylor Jenkins. Like, Memphis absolutely. Of course, Jenkins wasn't the first guy. Like, we hired J.B. Bickerstaff, and I was like, that's not an improvement. But, we eventually got to Taylor Jenkins, and I'm like so glad he's here, or that he's there in Memphis. But, Fizdale flamed out in New York too. I think Fizdale has a little too much personality for his own good sometimes. Like, he's entertaining, and he was, they say, like, he was instrumental in, like, the player development with the Heat organization and developing some of, like, their role players around, like, the Big Three era Heat. But I don't know. I don't see David Fizdale getting a head coaching job anytime soon. I think he's a media personality now. So, I feel like I had one other thing I wanted to talk about. Oh yeah, did not put this. This will be. I think I'll end the stream on this. But man, I don't know if y'all have heard if anyone's heard about like what's going on with the Arizona State football program, like the stories that are being printed by The Athletic and some other places. Arizona State is about to get absolutely wrecked by the NCAA, I have a feeling. So, let's break the situation down. It is being reported, and we have this, and this is the word being used for this, a dossier of names, dates, pictures, video, that basically outline how Arizona State, during the 15-month dark period, as the NCAA called it, how they basically eschewed all of the restrictions that the NCAA had on recruits visiting campus, like, and just extra recruiting restrictions during the last year. Arizona State ignored all of them. There's photo evidence of like Herm Edwards meeting with recruits on campus, talking with them in person, other coaches. And there's only one way this stuff gets out, by the way. Leaks from people who were a part of the program. So this is probably disgruntled former coaches, people who were on staff who are no longer on staff, and probably coaches who are there currently. Some of whom who are like, this is going to get out eventually anyway. I should do whatever I can to make sure I have a career moving forward. That I can be the guy or that I can be one of the people who's like, yeah, I was not cool with this, and I was one of the people who whistle blew this, whatever. And from looking at everything, the biggest reason that this happened was allegedly, or at the very least, that stuff has blown up so bad, is because defensive coordinator Antonio Pierce is apparently the biggest piece of crap, which isn't necessarily a shock. Anyone who, during his time as a ESPN like personality, I'm not gonna call him an analyst. That's too nice. But Pierce was a jerk when he was a player. He was a jerk for ESPN. Who would have imagined he would have rubbed fellow coaches the wrong way? And particularly some, or, coaches who he just so happened to be part of the reason they got sent out the door. And then he also was at the center of like eschewing, these rules. And the saddest part about this is I love Herm Edwards. But he made a bad decision here. Now, do I think these COVID restrictions were stupid? Like, especially by the time like we got to fall and everything. And really by the end of the summer, yeah, absolutely. But the rules are the rules, and you got to work within them. Everyone else did. Well, we'll say. I would say the majority of everyone else did. And here's another thing. The responses we've seen from other people in the industry, like at media days and stuff, you'll hear coaches and athletic directors say, really nice things about, rival coaches, athletic directors, programs, whatever, when behind the scenes, they absolutely don't like these people. Or, like, behind the scenes, like, off the record, they'll, say this, or this, like, negative about that person. When David Shaw just publicly comes out and blows you away for something. Oregon State's athletic director, like their new athletic director, just, or I want to say fairly new athletic director. Anyway, I think it was Oregon State's athletic director, Oregon State's, just, blasting, putting them on blast, of just, like eviscerating them. That does not happen. Like, you look at the stuff with like USC and Ohio State and Miami. Like, even then, people didn't really go hard after those guys, like in the press, or like after Jim Tressel, after Pete Carroll, in the press. The thing with Miami was more, it was a booster issue. But like, I remember no one went hard after the coaches. The coach, obviously, coach got yeeted out of there, but you just don't see, their, or coaching colleagues and, athletic department colleagues just lighting into other programs like they did over this. Because with all the other like recruiting things that, like money changing hands and stuff like that, things of that nature, which shouldn't happen. It's against the rules. Follow the rules, people. This was a bigger thing because this was like so like stringent of restrictions that anyone breaking these probably gave themselves a massive leg up in recruiting for certain prospects, which some of the, like, one of the players, well, I think one of the players, like, that they had, like, photo evidence of, like, being on campus is actually one of Arizona State's top-rated recruits from this, like, recruiting cycle. Like, he ended up signing. I'm trying to remember his name. I almost want to say it was something Douglas, maybe, but don't hold me to that. I don't have that in front of me. I was, so, yeah, I don't have a perfect memory. But anyway, one of their top recruits from this cycle was one of the recruits that, just know for a fact was on campus meeting with staff. If everyone else is, playing by those rules and you're not, you're getting a huge advantage. Because that dark period was just lifted, I think, at the beginning of this month. Which is why there's been all this huge recruiting news regarding, like, recruiting visits, like Arch Manning and a bunch of guys being at the University of Texas last week. Which, just having Arch Manning, like, in the building, like, putting on a like Texas Longhorns jersey, like people like even during like the Tom Herman era where Texas was back, like this is bigger than anything like for Texas football since like Mac Brown has been gone. Because like people at Austin International Airport like taking pictures with Arch Manning, like, and like that getting around social media, that kind of thing, like blowing up. Like that's big buzz for Texas because they've kept a lot of top Texas players, but there's been a lot of those guys who decided to choose to go to Texas A&M, you know, potentially, or choosing, you know, they thought they had Quinn Ewers, and now he's at Ohio State. Like, he decommitted. So, I don't know. I mean, and there's been a lot of, you know, competition in state lately. Of course, A&M's really and Jimbo Fisher has really got A&M's recruiting rolling, like, in a big way again. So, but with that being said, like, Arizona State, it's not looking good. And the biggest thing is, because this also involves COVID and how the media and considering, and, you know, a lot of the people in positions of power, like how they've used COVID and how they've treated this COVID situation and like PR and da-da-da-da-da. This is going to, as this blows up and as the NCAA gets into this, there's going to be a lot of other things that are going on right now. Like, I'm not saying that all the stuff with Tennessee is going to go away, but this is going to overshadow, like, the Tennessee, you know, scandal that happened, which a lot of people are already kind of moved on from anyway, which the punishments haven't come down yet, and I expect Tennessee to get at least a 1-year postseason ban from that. But considering what happened at Ole Miss, they only got like a 1-year postseason ban for like the stuff with Hugh Freeze, and that stuff was worse than what was going on at Tennessee. I feel like this is going to be like a 1-year postseason ban, like Ohio State, and Ole Miss. I can't remember if USC got a 2-year postseason ban. For their stuff, or if it was a 1 season, but that's what I see. What's going to happen to Arizona State could be far worse. Like, and I don't think I'm overhyping this. And I was watching I was watching Late Kick yesterday. 24/7 Sports. Definitely check out Late Kick. They go live, I think it's Tuesday, Thursday, and Sundays at 7 p.m. So he's not my or I'm not competing with him. So go watch his show at 7 or watch it on archive. Like, it's really good, solid, shorter than my show. Way better production value. But like Late Kick, like 24/7 Sports, they know what they're talking about. They have sources all over the place. They have industry connections. Like, and this guy has been in front of a lot of different things. He's, over the time I've watched him, he's been a pretty good judge of, like, of things that will happen or how media will cover things, stuff that'll kind of fall under the rug, stuff like that. He thinks this is going to overshadow any scandal we've had in a long time. So, like, this is probably going to be on, like, the Baylor and Penn State levels of just kind of, like, media coverage as this story breaks and unfolds. Like I think it's gonna be the biggest thing since those two. Maybe not as big as the Penn State one, but like this is gonna take a lot of attention because COVID is nuts. Like this is gonna get mainstream stuff because all the psychotic people who have a mental illness of overreacting to every little thing that has to do with, or that the media, says is dangerous or deadly or whatever. They're just going to run with this. Like, I think this is going to end up being a mainstream news story. So, anyway, that's the show for today. I'm going to get off of here. I'm going to take another Excedrin because my head is still hurting. Appreciate you for tuning in. I will be back Monday. I was, once again, sorry I didn't stream the show yesterday. If you like the show, please leave, hit that like button. If you want more, please subscribe, bell notification, turn it to all because, that would make me feel really good. And please leave a comment. That's what I was going to do for yesterday's show too. But I guess I'll do that Monday. So I will try and remember that. I need to start. One thing that I'm wanting to start doing is start actually really planning out rather than just knowing what the topics I want to hit, but really actually having an outline for how I want my show to go and kind of making it a little more, improve my organization and eventually hopefully improve graphics if I can ever not be terrible at graphic design. So with that, hope y'all have a blessed weekend.